All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to our December San Diego Imperial Regional Guided Pathways Office Hour. I'm Stacy Teeters, a regional coordinator for the San Diego Imperial region, with my esteemed colleague and partner, Wendy Smith. Our topic today is classified professionals, leadership, and guided pathways.
Our Guided Pathways office hours are a forum for cross-pollination. Our format today will be conversational. Each month, we feature one or more guests speaking with us on a particular subject. The rest of our time is open comment and Q&A about anything and everything Guided Pathways. For colleagues planning to share and learn from each other, we are recording this session. If you have questions we don't get to, feel free to post them through our San Diego Imperial Guided Pathways listserv. Our guests today are from Cosumnes River College. They are Tiffany Clark, an Educational Center Supervisor, Alex Casareno, Dean of English and Language Studies, and Dana Wasmer, Professor of Nutrition. In addition to the specialized roles they serve on campus, all three serve as tri-chairs for their college's Guided Pathways efforts. We're honored to have them here to discuss their work. Welcome, Cosumnes River team. I'm going to turn the conversation over to you.
Thank you. And so we are from Guided Pathways at CRC. And this slide here, you see this is our motto, time of completion for all students. And that's really what's been guiding us ever since we began this work. And we actually really began around 2015. And then the tri-chair focus began at that time as well. So next slide.
So the question is, what does it take to transform a college, and what does it take to break down the systematic inequity that's currently existing in our college and in many colleges too? So to fully understand the work that's ahead of us, we had to really go back and examine the typical student's experience. So if you haven't done something like this for your college, I would highly recommend it. It is really to map out what your current student's experience is. And as you can see, it is pretty darn confusing. At least it is for our students. We did this about, 3 years ago, maybe. So we realized right away how many barriers are in our students' way. We start with students from high school. If you look at the upper left-hand corner and look at the work of outreach, I mean, we examine every step. What's ironic is what you don't see on this is the layer of paperwork and paper trail that accompanies each step along the way. So what we realize then too is that we understand now why our students are not persisting, why they're not successful, and why our completion rate is so low. So if you just look at all the red arrows, which are basically all the barriers that they encounter, and they leave us for one reason or another. They leave us, right? Either they don't do well in the class, or they just can't get around a barrier. They're gone, and we lose track of them. So by doing this flow chart, you also begin to see the role of classified professionals. In reality, if you look at the last 3 squares on the lower right corner, that's where instructional faculty come into play. We have first day attendance, how successful are they at midterm, and then did they complete the course. But all the other boxes are really classified. So if we want to transform the process of our college and for our students, we have to engage our classified professionals. They're the ones who know the processes. They're the one who know every procedure. So with this, we realized that not only the classified, in order to really make the change, we also had to include management, because some decisions had to be made higher up. And if it's something where, and I think a lot of the problem is that we see and we do things because this is what we do, and we don't think about why, or if there's a better way, because it just becomes routine. Sometimes it's helpful to have a different set of eyes, whether it's from an outside source or a faculty looking in at a classified, or a classified looking in at a faculty's position, like, why are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. If you want to get from point A to point B, why don't you just go a direct straight line? And so we really use this to explain the why. And in the next slide, this is how we have been able to transform the process. A lot easier, a lot more transparent. So we want the goal obviously for everyone, classified as well as the administration and faculty, is that we want students to be successful. We want a very, very clear path for the students. And so we do the outreach, we do the application process combined with the financial aid. We actually have orientation, and we also now present our first-time full-time students with an opt-out schedule. We've also combined the career exploration so that they know if they choose a degree, what it means as far as opportunity or transfer, that they need to transfer in order to become, let's say, a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whichever it is, right? You can't do that with an associate's degree. We also transform our college. Once they come into our campus, we no longer are called divisions. We have changed our programs into meta majors that we call career and academic communities, or CAC. So that's how we make our connections with our students. And in each of our CAC, we have 8 of them. And we also have one for undecided or GE transfer. We have the student success team embedded in there. That's where you get the case management. All of that to help the students complete each semester. And you see that arrow going back because persistence, they have to come back the next semester and pretty much go through the same process. But our goal is to provide them with the support that they need in a timely manner, and almost to the point of being intrusive, so that they are, because most of the time they don't even know what's available or if they need help or when they need help. So now I'll hand this over to Alex.
So if we can go to the next slide, please. So our tri-chair focus at CRC has had a long history. We began this focus in guided pathways really in about 2015, and then we began in 2017 really putting together our guided pathways teams. So the tri-chair focus has a history going back all the way to how we've governed for a while. We understand that faculty and classified are crucial in terms of understanding how students are going to be successful. So with that in mind, then we've always been aware that if we're not going to be inclusive in terms of the voices of the people who are there, then we're going to not be able to do things the way that we want to. So we, in terms of our integrated planning, it was always focused on tri-chairs. We had our program review, even that process involved classified tri-chairs, because we have programs, particularly in the student services area, that go through a very similar type of review. Our accreditation since 2014 has been involved with through a tri-chair model. And then within accreditation and within program review and then certainly within guided pathways, each of our major initiatives then have subgroups. So subgroups in guided pathways are are clarifying, entering, staying, and learning on the path. And each of those has a tri-chair model. So there is an administrator, faculty member, and then a classified person. And when we did all of this, we sat down together to determine who would be the best persons around, and people were invited to take part. And then once we knew that there was a particular classified professional that was interested, or there was a particular faculty person interested, then the academic senate or the classified senate then officially appointed those persons, so that their supervisors knew that there was this involvement, so that they could have that involvement as part of their ongoing work. Can we go to the next slide? So at one of the things that we learned when we were in the Guided Pathways project was the concept that this was a faculty-led initiative, and clearly there's a faculty involvement. And while the Academic Senate is very clear to say that this is a faculty-led initiative, our Academic Senate understands as well that this is also a classified initiative, and that has always been our perspective. The administration then exists in terms of governance to make sure that what is being designed can actually happen. So my role is tri-chair, and then my role as Guided Pathways dean is to make sure that I can intervene where I need to identify how administrative structures might block change, to make sure that what classified and what faculty are designing indeed can actually happen. Let's go to the next slide.
When you think about, why we would want to engage in this type of model, I mean, there's really many different reasons. We wanted to look at the big picture of our campus, and in order to engage in a complete redesign of how we do our work, really, from the get-go, we realized that this was going to take our entire campus and all of our folks to be involved in moving this forward. We hear time and time again about the silos that exist on college campuses, and how can you really go about your work when the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So to engage all of our folks at all levels was really helping to break down those silos that existed on our campus. We needed to have that cross-campus communication so that the bug of excitement and drive to make the change for our students, even if everybody wasn't engaging in the meetings, even if everybody wasn't able to come to the different forums, but they're hearing about it. So it's a wave that gets across the campus for folks to know, okay, we're really doing something, and I better hop on this train because I don't want to be left behind. We really want, to create an inclusive community. We talk about the experience that we want our students to have, and especially as community colleges, we have folks from, so many different experiences, backgrounds, ethnicities, and creating this community feel for them. Well, we first have to be a community ourselves. And so really having this tri-chair model across our campus creates that community and lets the students know that, hey, we are a family and a community of folks that are going to bring you in to that same community feeling. And it really, when you boil down what we're doing and why we're going about the work that we are, everybody has a focus on students, and we all have the same goal to see our students be successful. And so once we really started taking a hard look at our numbers, once we had research really engage in looking at success rates and persistence and completion, it was hard to deny that, there was some real work that needed to be done. And so everybody could look at, okay, where is my role in helping to move the needle and drive student success? We all can have that as a shared goal. We wanted to make sure that people felt invested instead of just saying, hey, we got this group together and here's the direction that we decided to go in. Now you need to help make it happen. We wanted folks to feel like they were involved in those decisions, and that way they would feel more invested in the outcome. And then, of course, to hear all the different voices and get the different perspectives on the work that we wanted to do. Before being a supervisor at the Elk Grove Center is one of our outreach locations, I spent 17 years as an outreach specialist. And I had an opportunity to actually teach a course one semester. And I told my students that having been or being, and I did it at the same time, so being an outreach specialist and doing that work made me a better instructor. And then having had that experience as teaching, that then made me a better outreach specialist, because I was able to really experience things on both sides for the students. In the classroom, because of my work as an outreach specialist, I had a really broad range of knowledge about all the different resources on campus that were available to students, all the folks that they could reach out to. So I was able to, really give them information on things even outside of the subject that I was teaching that would help them along their journey. And then going back out and engaging with potential students, I was able to say, hey, here's kind of some of the things that you're going to experience in the classroom, and here's what the faculty are going to expect from you. So that's the type of conversation that we want to bring to the meetings and committees and things that we're having, so that we can hear different voices and be able to give a well-rounded perspective on what we need to do differently for our students. Next slide, please. Of course, there were some concerns, right? So the biggest one I would say is just the level of participation, because our classified folks are, typically our frontline workers. They are generally hopping and have, work that they're doing, and so don't feel as though they're able to participate, or that their jobs don't make it as flexible for them. So, how we were able to kind of tackle that on our campus is, as Alex described, that, management is giving us that support. So really bringing the team together to say, hey, this is a priority for our campus. And so we need for you to engage with your staff to say, hey, yes, it is okay, and we'll figure out, and we want your voice there, and we want you at the table. So really, from the top down, the president, making it a priority for us. One example of that was a huge thing on our campus is we had our classified institute, and it was, I've been at CRC for 20 years, and it was the first time in that time that we actually closed down the campus so that all classified staff were able, or classified professionals were able to participate. And so, that was a way of kind of, putting your money where your mouth is and showing like, yes, we do value you. Yes, this is really important. And we're going to do something, out of the box for us to be able to have folks participate. And then, the next concern is, okay, how do we really go about implementing this model and bringing folks into this role? Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is what we did. So, we just really let folks know what we were trying to do, that we really wanted to, bring in, usher in this new culture that values communication. So we really provided a lot of opportunities for folks to not only participate on the smaller committees. So as Alex mentioned, we had our tri-chair focus and model for each pillar of the Guided Pathways movement. And then also the team, the committee themselves were made up of classified faculty and managers. But we also held campus-wide forums where folks could come in a larger group to participate. We had regular communication through our internal, I would say it's like a internal online newsletter that would come out weekly. So there was a section in there that was Guided Pathways focused. We developed a Canvas course that was focused on Guided Pathways. So we really tried to figure out multiple ways that folks would be able to get the information and would also be able to share their voice with us. There was intentional focus about developing the tri-chair model, really looking for folks that had an interest to step up as leaders, but then also really talking to managers and supervisors about, who maybe is on your team, who might not put themselves out there, but through the work that they're doing on a daily basis would be a driving force for this work. And continuing to focus folks in on what our goal is, and just making sure that we keep students at the center of everything that we're doing. And understanding why we're doing the work. And that's where research really plays a big role for us as well. Looking at the numbers, looking at the facts that can't be denied, and this is why we're doing this work. One of the things that we, weren't always good at, but when we had our team visit come, they said, you guys are doing some really good things. Have you taken a minute to sit back and celebrate the successes? So we're kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess we don't do that. We're just, so excited, and we're churning and burning and wanting to just keep moving forward. So that's something that we really try to do a better job at. And we even, we had a little party, and Alex got a cake with the Guided Pathways logo on it. So that was really cool. Just an opportunity to really sit back and say, pat yourselves on the back. You've done some good work. So we're continuing to do that. And then, of course, looking at what's working and what's not working. And we've let folks know, like, this is not going to be a one and done thing. We're going to have Guided Pathways, 1.0, 1.5, 2.0, and keep going, because we want to make sure that, we're doing right by our students. So just letting people know that this is a work in progress. And as we're going about and as things change, I mean, we look at, where we're at right now. When we first, were in the Guided Pathways project, we never would have thought that we would, be in this pandemic and have to do things on a remote basis. And so, as things change and as the needs change, then we got to keep rolling with that. And so letting folks know that, we're not going to just be stuck in what we think is the right thing right now, but we're going to keep moving and use the ideas and the Guided Pathways framework to move us forward and continue to create an environment where all of our students can be successful. Next slide. I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you so much. And just as a note, this is a community discussion, so feel free to ask questions via chat, jump on your mic, ask questions of this team, because we have some really great information, and I feel so inspired to, like, oh my gosh, so many great points. I can't wait till our next regional Guided Pathways leaders meeting to really talk about this more in depth as well. But with that, I will encourage folks to ask some questions.
I have a question. Hi, everyone. I'm Jania Lindstrom with Miracosta. I have a question. I think you mentioned success teams. I'm wondering how your success teams are structured, what some of the goals that you have set for your success teams, what types of roles you have on your teams, and how the implementation has been for you.
I'll start. Our success teams began, I think, last year before we went, the semester before we went remote. It involves classified in terms of our student success coaches. We have counseling faculty. Some of the success teams have faculty advisors. We have DSPS liaisons, and some of them also do have students as well. The goal of the success team is generally to make sure that we're able to provide case management in a way that's dynamic to students. And so our classified professionals are crucial there. They're providing, first the kind of triage that goes on in terms of that case management, making sure that we're providing the student where they need to go. We're kind of directing them to where they need to go. We also have, for this fall, once we went remote, we began to see what that impact was upon our students. And so we have a new focus, which is completely focused on equity. And the concept is we won't fall, meaning that we launched this fall, that we're not going to stop what we're doing simply because we're remote. We're going to continue with that with very specific targets, equity targets. And those then become also a focus of the success teams as well. I would say that, I have a success team in English and language studies, and it's crucial that I have access, and my faculty have access to the student success coach. There's constant flow of information about students back and forth, about resources back and forth. So I think in many ways it works differently in the different communities that we have. But in terms of mine, it's crucial to know that where the resources are that the students need, and the person who's always going to know that is always the classified professional, and often it's others outside of the success team. So financial aid has often been involved in terms of of holding workshops for our success team to make sure that we know how to refer students and how students are going to be successful once they're able to access financial aid. So there's a variety of ways in which the team works.
And I'll just add to that, I'm also the chair of our allied health in our health and human services, CAC. And what we have are programs that have a second admission process. I don't know if you guys have nursing programs or something similar where, you know, they take their program prerequisite and then they apply to the programs. And that is really confusing for students. Right. And we probably, like many of you, have a lot of first generation students, so they don't have anyone close to them to guide them, say, no, this is what you're supposed to do and this is what you're supposed to take. So for us, with our focus, and that's why Alex is saying that sometimes the student success team work differently because of where they are housed and what CAC, we call it, career and academic communities, because the functions are different. So we needed to provide our students and going remote. Believe me, our idea was, oh, it'd be great. We could create a community, a happy place. They could all come and we can visit, we can talk, you know, talk to their faculty, talk to, you know, like it becomes that open space. And then we went remote and we're like, okay, now we're looking at these 2x2 screens. What do we do? We utilize that and said, okay, then we invite everybody to the Zoom and we have an orientation of the prerequisites that are for each of the programs. We have counselors waiting in the breakout room so that we can feed them right into it so that they could plan out their schedule, know what they need to take, apply, you know, get information about financial aid, all of that in one Zoom. So we do that twice a year. With the orientation and then the orientation / enrollment counseling session. And that has worked out really well. And we have probably 100 students. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but 100 students at RSVP and probably half, maybe 60 of them show up, right? Which is about the right number. But to say that we were able to help 60 students is a lot compared to no students at all. Even if we're doing it just twice, 100 students a semester in these 2-3 hour blocks, that's a great return rate, I think. So that's what we're doing in our SST. And so far it's been successful, especially in this remote environment, because that has been a challenge, as you all know, and trying to see how we can engage and still provide timely information and get them the resources that they need.
I have a question. And this is for Tiffany. Tiffany, you mentioned that classified professionals aren't always able to participate. What do you think has enabled you to participate as a tri-chair?
I have good support from my boss and great support from my team. Alex and Dana are wonderful to work with. And so we kind of come together and talk about, what works for the three of us as far as getting together for meetings and things of that nature. I think as a whole, though, I mean, it really, really started with the president of our college and the fact that, he was really supportive and wanting our classified professionals to be able to participate and saying so on a regular basis and creating space for the managers to then say, okay, we got to figure out how to make this work. Some folks are like, if I need to be answering calls for an hour so that my staff can go and participate in this meeting, then that's what I need to do. And then I think also, there are some of us that really feel the importance of carrying the voice for maybe some of our folks who aren't able to come to the table. So even just in like our classified Senate meetings, being there and giving people a chance to speak out in that different forum, but then bringing it to these other meetings and other committees that maybe they aren't able to be at the table for. And honestly, the pandemic has been great for participation because everything is happening on Zoom. So, there's some silver linings to this. And so this is something that, we can take back when we are on ground to say, hey, let's record more meetings. Let's have more meetings on Zoom. So if somebody can't leave their desk, they're still able to participate this way. So I would say, and even some of my concern was being not on the main campus. So it's only about 6 miles away, but that translates into an hour, right? By the time you get to the parking lot and you drive over and you find a space and you walk to where, so, there are times where they're like, we'll come to you. So I think, having really good partners, having the importance from the top down, and then also creating multiple spaces for folks to participate. That's what's worked well for our campus and worked well for me personally.
There's a question in the chat. It says, what is the compensation structure for classified staff? So there have been times where there's been some rub because classified can't be compensated outside of their contract and what has been contracted. But faculty can be, right? Because they can have, special assignment, or they can have reassigned time or something like that. So my role in the very beginning of all of this was to help supervisors identify time. So I was on the phone and I did work with certain supervisors and managers to make sure that certain classified people had the time carved out, right? So that they can go to those meetings. And so to make sure that if there was going to be a particular institute, we always did classified. Usually had like 6 people go to institute and usually two classified. So make sure that person's work wasn't just going to be piled up necessarily when they went back. That was there other ways in which we could have that work and taken care of. There was an instance where we did hire a classified temp to come in and to work in different places to make sure that certain work got done. And that was sort of just a temporary thing at the time when we first began. And then I had a classified temp as well. And he was able to work a lot with different supervisors to make sure that if there was any paperwork, all of that got taken care of. So that helped me because then I can then take care of that paperwork, or my administrative assistant could, as well as my temp administrative assistant. So we tried to, as many ways as we could, try to find the ways in which we could backfill the work or to alleviate alleviate the pain, because some classified would be worried about going to a trip they wanted to go to. We had San Diego as a place to go, and everyone wants to go to San Diego, but missing 2 days of work and you're classified, and what's that going to mean when you go back? So trying to work with their supervisors and work with them to make sure that it could actually happen. We don't have the option for stipends within that, but we do continue to have the option to backfill if we need to backfill. And as long as that Guided Pathways money continues to be there, that'll do that. I think the college also recognizes too that as equity is our whole focus, right? And you can't have equity without having people involved. So if that's going to happen, then those folks need to be continued to be supported to come in. So one way is, if we're going to require you to go to a meeting, we can go to you, right? We can close the campus. We can do those things that we can do within the constraints of classified contracts. I've also have been encouraging, as administrator, been encouraging classified to make sure that in negotiations, the concept of the fact that they can't have stipends needs to always be brought up, because those things are negotiated, right? And the fact that we haven't been able to do that are kinds of things that our district has been asking. What are the barriers to our work here to advance this change? And one of those, that concept of our contracts can be a barrier in this sense for classified in particular.
And to answer the question about the success coach, that's all they do. We have 6 success coaches, so they may cover more than one CAC. We wish we have more, because their job has been so helpful for our students as well as our faculty. faculty have been reaching out to our success coach saying, hey, you know, I see so-and-so hasn't been showing up for class. Can you just give them a call, see what's going on, that type of thing. And so that part has been really helpful in regards to outreach or making that high touch to our students. So, and that's all they do. And believe me, they're busy.
Our classified senate is pretty involved in Guided Pathways, has been very supportive all along. And our current classified senate president is also one of our tri-chairs in one of the pillar groups.
Quick question. What do you think the tri-chair model and this really purposeful inclusion has done to your campus culture? Just kind of reflecting on that for a moment.
I think it's helped people know one another, right? So we have these, some of our pillar teams were very large and a lot of people, like entry, for example, was really big, Stain was really big, and it had a lot of faculty and classified professionals. So they get to know one another and they get to know the different kinds of roles that classified and faculty play on campus. And so that's really helped. I also think too that when you have that kind of a structure, you get to know the jobs more specifically. So as a dean, prior to being involved with Guided Pathways, I knew a lot of classified, but I didn't necessarily know their jobs, right? But as I got more involved in Guided Pathways, I had to know their jobs because I had to understand how their time was going to then be impacted. So it was sitting with them and learning the jobs, understanding what the job was, having them show me so that I can be more forceful in my conversations with like the VPA to make sure that this person is going to or the VPA or sort of manager, this person is going to need to have time, and where can we do that? And so that was a useful thing.
I would say also that it's given space for us as a unit to know each other as well. Through some of the committee work and things, folks from across different departments have had an opportunity to come together. For example, through one of our meetings, the admin assistants across different departments realized we have some of the same concerns, some of the same issues. We should probably meet on a regular basis. And so that was something that wouldn't have happened if folks hadn't been in the same, room together and started talking and realizing like, wow, we can help each other, we can support each other. They talked about developing like a binder with just helpful information for, new folks that might come in with, some job aids and things of that nature. So some of it has really helped us even just as a unit within the classified professional ranks to get to know each other and to realize, hey, we can do more to support each other, even though we may work in different departments. I also think that as far as culture as a whole, when I first came to CRC, we were the smallest campus in our 4-college district. And, like I said, I've been working at CRC for 20 years. And that really allowed us to have, this family feel. So we were always kind of the family feel campus where everybody knew each other. And, we just were really supportive of each other. So I think this, as we have grown, we're no longer the smallest campus. We have, when I first started, there were 3 colleges, now there's 4. It's allowed us to keep some of that family feel across our campus.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's always amazing when we have tri-chairs in our governance committees as well. So, you go to these committee meetings, and there might be administrator in the room, and then 5 faculty members and 5 classified members from different parts of the campus, and all discussing equity or all discussing whatever the topic is or what the focus of the committee is. So it's really nice to see that. And people listen to one another. I don't see people trying to like say, I know more than you because I have this degree. I don't see that.
And I think it also minimized the blame game. Like, oh my God, we actually had a lot of faculty or chairs, that is, a lot of frustration with making the class schedule, which sounds like, that should be pretty easy, right? But it's not, because what we send over is not always what shows up, and then all these revision that takes place. And so as a result, faculty are like, I don't get it. Why can't they just do this right? You know, I send it over this format and whatever. And then they lived a day in the life of a scheduler. And they realize, oh my gosh, this is not their main job, right? And this half their time is payroll. Like more than half their time is payroll. And when they're going in to make one little change because you forgot to put a period here or whatever there, it's asking a lot. So I think that appreciation, like their job is much more complicated than we think. Then it makes, as a faculty, I'm like, okay, just make sure you dot your I's and cross your T before you send it over, right? Let's just minimize the work as much as possible, because now we appreciate what they have to do. So I think that helps too. And having this tri-chair model as our backbone, this is how we've always done things. This is how we always made decisions. But being also able to experience and realize and share, right, their frustration and as well as our frustration, so they understand. It's like, we're not trying to make this harder for you. We just need to know how to best communicate and how to ease everybody's job, so there's fewer steps involved and fewer inaccuracies.
And the more we know each other's jobs, we also know what the processes are that maybe need to happen or maybe need to change. And so that's crucial as well, because that's part of guided pathways. If you're going to change student success in a kind of meaningful way, you really have to transform the college. So that does mean processes, and it does mean making sure that those silos are not going to be there, because the silos work against any kind of change.
So I did get a direct question, and I'll try to summarize it here. There are a number of colleges in our region who have been experiencing some leadership transitions, but then they also have, there's this noted culture, both viewed internally and externally, as being more administrator and faculty dominant, where classified professionals are not willingly or actively brought in and engaged.
Right.
What advice might you give to those, those colleges, those leaders, faculty, classified professionals at each of these institutions, which are really having to also do a lot of culture work at the same time as their guided pathways work?
I would say institute tri-chairs, right? Really focus in terms of being intentional in any kind of initiative that's coming across, that you have the voices of the constituents that matter. And the constituents that matter are classified and faculty. And then the administrators are there to make sure that this is going to happen, to make sure that certain things happen. So that has probably been a view of our district for a while, that, we're not necessarily going to dictate as administrators what you want to do, right? The role is that we take templates very, very seriously in terms of curriculum, right? We make sure that when we're talking about anything regarding student services, classified are always involved, because that is the majority of student services often. That if we're looking at processes that we have, like when we had enrollment management concerns, we had to have classified there, right? Because they're the ones who are dealing with the scheduling issues that are always there. And we have another one of those committees now, a scheduling committee, because of being remote and what's going on. And it's dominated intentionally by classified, because we need to make sure that the classified voices are being heard. So I would say, really work towards that kind of concept. And, we did it in a variety of ways. Like when we had our non-smoking policy before, that was like a thing imposed upon us by the chancellor's office. The college did it through a task force with tri-chairs, right? When we started looking at dual enrollment, we did it with tri-chairs, right? And those tri-chairs are selected based upon interest in the kinds of leadership they have and the kinds of background within the jobs that are there, right? So that's intentional, making sure that the classified Senate always has a voice. Our classified Senate invites everybody, and people go, and they also have a voice within participatory governance as well. So that also helps too. That's a tri-chair model, is where our whole participatory governance committee is a tri-chair model. People call out the president when he needs to be called out, or the president calls out somebody when they need to be called out. That's kind of, I think, something that's been happening at our campus. The culture of that is that voices aren't going to be, dominated by just one person. So we've had these campus conversations, these difficult conversations. For how long has that been going on? Like 2-3 years, right? Before we went remote, looking at the hard issues like, equity, and why don't we have it, right? And looking at these success rates, and how can we continue to say that we're proud of our diversity, but we can't get our students of color through, right? Those kinds of things. Those are conversations that everybody's interested in, and they're conversations that allow people to talk and to be heard, knowing that we're not going to solve it in an hour, right? But we brought out the conversation in the hour, right? And it's constantly celebrating in any way that we can, what happens, and when we have things happening at the campus for students, it's often student services focused, right? Our whole, cares, our whole focus on basic needs was a classified professional focus. So making sure that those voices are always heard, and not allowing others to dominate. And when there are places in our district where there's probably some dominance of certain constituency groups, right? We won't go there. We couldn't go there because we also knew that wasn't going to work, right? And we had our classified to say no. So that's helpful.
I just want to kind of echo what Alex was saying, and we actually call them courageous conversations. And so I would say what's really helpful is really just really calling it out and having those courageous conversations. We actually, coined that phrase for some of our meetings, that we're going to have some courageous conversations. We're doing this work on our campus, but make no mistake that we're still working at it, and there's still work to be done. At this classified institute that we had last year, we had Veronica Kiefer-Lewis from Pienza. She was our keynote, and she was amazing. And I think this was the first time in a large group space where she called it out and said, you want to talk about equity, let's talk about the ranks of faculty versus classified versus managers. And I think it was so refreshing for our classified professionals to have somebody just say, we know that exists on campuses and it is not okay. And when we're talking about equity, we need to blow this whole thing wide open. So I think, not being afraid to just really call it out and say, we have some issues in this area and let's work on it. And then having folks like, Dana and Alex truly represent some of the best of our campus, and having those folks out there really leading the charge. So you got to find those folks that are going to be your cheerleaders and that are going to be out there leading the charge to bring other folks along as well.
I was just going to add that there's actually no way that you can deny the needed involvement of classified when you're trying to do anything, especially something as big as transforming the college, making it more equitable. And I know it sounds silly, but that flow chart you saw, the first or second slide, looks like a total mess because that's what it was. But if you really break it down and see the nitty gritty, it provides you with that big picture. And then you're like, oh my gosh, our poor students. And I've told Tiffany and Alex all the time, like, I don't even know how our students get through. Every time I see it, another issue, another concern, I can't imagine that they somehow got through this, with all the barriers that we put in front of them. So I'm totally impressed with our students, but that's not, shouldn't be that way, right? So when you look at that and you see like, wow, look at every one of these steps. They've been touched by a classified that involved a classified position. So how can you deny their voice? You can't. That just not possible. And if our goal, if we're truly committed to equity, if we're truly committed to student focused and student centered, then everything has to be on the table. Everyone needs to be at the table.
One of the things we did in the very beginning of the California Guided Pathways project is we looked at how our students were going through and whether they were able to get through, right? So we had this really big, form of, people coming together, faculty, classified administrators coming together to understand, can you actually do this? And in that form, we challenge people to basically say, can you draw us a map? That shows us how the students go through these programs. And faculty found out that classified knew often where the breaking points were, because they're the ones who are dealing with those breaking points. They're the admins trying to get people in their classes. They're the people in student services, looking to say, but you said you were going to offer this and you never do, right? So, those kinds of things were important. And I think that if we hadn't done that, if we don't listen to the fact that administrators don't know it all and faculty don't know it all, that we have to be able to then make sure that we have everybody in the room.
Great, thank you all so much. And just a huge shout out again to our special guests from Cosumnes River College, Tiffany Clark, Dana Bosmer, and Alex Casareno. I've just been taking it all in, right? It's really, as Tiffany was sharing, it's almost practicing what you preach in terms of equity, right? To truly recognize the value of every human being on your campus and to bring them into that conversation and that decision making to create a brighter future for our students. So thank you for sharing all of your wealth of knowledge today. As we come up on the hour here, we did have a few short announcements that we wanted to share, but we did want to mention that there is one of the last CO webinar of this calendar year is happening tomorrow morning, and it's on building resilience and protecting progress, the hard work of cultivating cultural change for equitable student success. So that should be a really great and robust conversation, and we hope you can join us for that, and we can drop that information into the chat as well. In terms of other things coming up here in our region, we are working on scheduling out our spring 2021 San Diego Imperial Guide Pathways Office Hours series. So you can see here we have a robust number of topics that we're looking forward to hopefully getting to in the next year, subject to change, of course. But January, we are looking forward to continuing to highlight the work of classified professionals and how important it is in transforming and getting involved in our guided pathways efforts. So keep an eye out for that. Margaret, do you want to chime in here?
Hi, so I'm Margaret. I'm an assistant for the San Diego Imperial Guided Pathways team. As a reminder, we also have a San Diego Imperial Guided Pathways events calendar and a YouTube page where I posted videos and recordings of our events. So please check that out and I'll link it in the chat.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And then lastly, if you're new to our regional events or Guide Pathways events, we highly encourage you to stay connected and get the latest updates with what's happening in our region by getting connected to our local regional listserv. And I will share, it's even open to our other regions as well if you want to join and learn what's happening in the San Diego Imperial area too. So please check that out. We'll also drop information on how to get connected in that, and we will be updating all of our office hour information via that platform moving forward into the next year. So with that, Wendy, wrapping it up.
I just want to thank everyone for coming and say that I hope this helps your college continue in your important equity work. We thank each of you for your commitments to students and their success and safety. We're grateful to work with such amazing colleagues. Please be well and have a restorative holiday break. Goodbye, everyone.